mortality kind of hits you in the face and you kind of go, when you're young, you're just like, oh, I'm invincible and I can eat whatever junk I want. And for me, at least, I ate whatever junk I wanted, never really got too big or whatever. But, now I'm thinking want to keep track of what I'm eating and actually do the exercise because I don't want to die at this point. Your relationships, your support structure, your family, it's got to be right up there with what you do to blow off steam, which for me was music, and what you do to stay healthy, which is exercise. Because I would leave music to go do my science and I'd get reinvigorated by the science. And then when that started to seem like, oh, this is getting kind of frustrating, then I'd go back to the music and I'd have a fresh perspective on the music. But I think the two most important things the vocalist needs to do is drink lots of fluids and get lots of sleep.
Welcome to the Collaborative Resource Hub by Wellness Provisions. Our mission is to bridge the gap between mental health, wellness, and music, specifically rock and roll. I'm Amy McBride, owner of Wellness Provisions, the most badass wellness business. Wellness Provisions supplies rock and rollers with high-quality supplements. We give you a trustworthy place to go where you can essentially shop blindfolded. Our wellness kits were created out of a need to simplify your shopping experience and make it stress-free. You'll get the most effective nutrients in the least amount of bottles with the least trial and error. Immerse yourself in the Collaborative Resource Hub by going to our website where you'll have access to helpful resources that can nudge you in the right direction. Let's inspire each other. If that guy did it, so can you. Find the Collaborative Resource Hub interviews on YouTube, all major podcast platforms, and subscribe to our newsletter to stay in the loop. Last but not least, my legal disclaimer: nothing in this interview or the Collaborative Resource Hub substitutes medical advice. Please connect with your GP if you need medical guidance. Milo from the Descendents, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Yeah. So you're the singer of the Descendents.
Yeah.
How would you describe the band to someone who hasn't heard you guys before?
Well, Caffeine influenced pop music, but emphasis on the caffeine more than on the pop. We throw little poppy elements in there, but it's really more about how fast can we play.
Yeah.
We still try to do that even in our aged years.
So do you need a lot of caffeine before you do like a live show to get through it then?
Yes, it used to be that we just did caffeine because we enjoyed it and it made things more fun. And now it's like, it's beyond like, well, we're going to do this to make it fun. It's like, well, we need to do this in order to even complete the set. I mean, we play for an hour and a half at mind-numbingly fast speeds. And yeah, I think it's to the point now where everyone in the band has to get kind of a little jacked up before we play. The drummer Bill, he says, well, I got to have my 10 shots of espresso, otherwise I'm not getting on stage, that kind of thing. So
does he literally drink 10?
Yeah.
Wow. I guess if he only does it like before shows, then like it'll keep like that kind of tolerance.
Yeah. In fact, he found himself drinking more caffeine throughout the day and realized, oh, I'm ruining the show experience. So he had to wean himself off of it to kind of reduce his tolerance so that the show was that much more kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you exercise or do anything to like stay, to be able to have like the lung capacity and all that kind of stuff? And do you do any of that?
Yeah, I run. I was a runner in high school, a runner in college as well. And then I kind of have, gone in and out of running through the years. Right now I'm in a good phase. Thank you, COVID, I guess. Yeah. Thank you, pandemic. I have so much time to just, during the last year, I'd be kicking myself like I should be training for a marathon or something, given how much time I have, which I'm not doing, but I am running and very happy about that. So yeah, it helps my lung capacity. I think swimming's even better, but I haven't been able to get in a pool for the past, year.
Right.
It's mainly been the running, and it's been real helpful. So yeah.
How many miles do you usually run when you go out?
These days, 3, 4, 5, that kind of thing. I'm working up to, I mean, it's like I'd like to be able to run 5, 6, 7, but I find that even though I've been doing it now for a few months, in my old age, it hasn't just kind of come back to me as it's come in the past. It's like, it's still painful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when I do my 3 to 4 miles, I finish and I go, someday this is going to be easier. Someday, I don't know, but yeah, but it's fun. I mean,
Yeah.
and I feel it, you get that runner's high and you're like, this is great. Yeah. And I just read that runner's high they used to think it was endorphins, and now they think it's endo CBDs.
Oh, really?
That's what the new studies are saying. It's not endorphins at all. It's endo CBD. So some cannabinoid, endogenous cannabinoid substances is what's giving you that runner's high, which is great. I'll take it. I'll take
Yeah.
whatever I can. Yeah.
Huh. That's cool. So what is your, I guess, overall relationship with like your health and wellness now versus when you were younger?
Well, I think now, mortality kind of hits you in the face and you kind of go, when you're young, you're just like, I'm invincible
Yeah.
I can eat whatever junk I want. And for me, at least I ate whatever junk I wanted, never really got too big or whatever. And, now I'm thinking want to keep track of what I'm eating and actually do the exercise because I don't want to die at this point. And so it's, I don't know if you know the story of the rest of the band, but Bill, the drummer, had a huge health scare in 2010 where he had a pulmonary embolism and almost died. And then he also, upon finding out that he had this embolism, the doctors realized that he also had a brain tumor. So they had to remove this like grapefruit-sized tumor from his head. So as a band, we sit there and go, this may be our, last, tour, or this may be our last show, this kind of a thing. And I think that also goes into our health. Bill looks after his health much better now than he used to. And I've kind of taken it to heart as well. None of us want to die.
Yeah.
Story. So yeah.
That's a good carrot to have on the end of a stick, your life. Have you struggled in the past with any substance or alcohol abuse?
No, actually, when Bill and I went to school together in high school, and we were both kind of teetotalers, like, no, we're not doing that. And, I wouldn't call us straight edge per se, but we were basically uninterested in it. Then of course, I mean, if you considered caffeine a drug, we became major caffeine addicts, obviously, and we still are today. But I think in terms of drugs, we haven't really, that hasn't been something that I've kind of pursued.
Yeah.
I think I like to have a tipple after the show, so I'll definitely have a little bit of a beer and harder stuff after the show, just as a way of calming down, as a way of kind of chilling out.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to feel like with all that, I feel like moderation. And I now, of course, I realize that a lot of this is brain configurations. Some people can't, because of the way their brain chemistry works, can't do moderation. I feel very fortunate and grateful that I can do moderation. And so that's what I do.
Yeah, that's a true perception. It's a valid point.
Yeah.
When you were younger, because I feel like that's when people tend to get more heat or more shit from people. Like if you weren't partaking in any kind of like substances, like did people give you a hard time or be like, oh, come on, man, have some, like any of that? Was that a thing?
No, I mean, because I went to, during college, you're surrounded by it, obviously. And I definitely partook, but I never really, I never really felt like, well, I have to do this.
Right.
It was a choice. And usually upon making that choice, you just regret it later. You're like, oh, okay. Maybe I partook a little too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's one of the things about, alcohol, drugs, all that kind of stuff, is they have a way of spanking you after the fact. And I kind of go, and I would take that to heart usually.
Yeah.
Just, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that again, or I'm not going to do that much again, or whatever.
Right. To that severity.
Yeah. And that's been what's helped me kind of hone in on this strategy of moderation, just because I feel like I can have a beer, but I can have a beer, but I don't want to have 10 beers, Yeah. Right. So that's kind of how I do it.
Yeah. I dig it. That's good. What's your take on eating healthy? What does that look like to you?
Well, I live with a vegetarian, and I've gone vegetarian for some brief number of months, and I would say that, you know, I would say that I try to eat vegetarian with this person, my daughter. And so I probably end up eating vegetarian, 5 or 6 nights a week, and then having meat one night. And then we have no shortage of green kind of stuff. That's all. She's just like, she just mouths the green stuff.
That's
And
awesome.
we're all kind of like doing that. And that's kind of how I've dealt with it. I haven't really, I've just kind of decided, just maybe out of lack of curiosity, maybe, that if I eat enough green stuff and enough healthy stuff, I don't need a supplement. So I haven't really pursued any kind of supplements of any sort, just because I feel like I can try to eat a balanced diet and accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I've done it. Like I said, I try to stay away from the meats, but I'm not vegetarian. I just, try to kind of eat them in limited quantities.
Yeah, that's fair. I like the idea, and it's true. Food is medicine. So if you're eating a lot of variety of like fresh foods, you're getting, minerals and vitamins and stuff.
Right.
There's the whole thing that like the soil is more depleted now than ever before, but I feel like, hey, if you're eating that many, that much like spinach and kale and stuff,
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, and it maybe depends on how you source it out. I mean, where is it coming from? If it's coming from some factory farmed area, you may be right. And maybe the minerals are somewhat reduced.
Yeah.
And I haven't really looked into too much of that. I mean, we shop a lot at these farmers markets and hopefully get something more organic, something more out of, a less kind of factory situation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's true though, because like the smaller farms, I mean, typically, they are doing better, crop rotation and like cover crops or whatever that are, like adding nutrition to the soil.
You move from the legumes to the non-legumes.
Yeah.
And the legumes is what puts the nitrogen back in the soil. And then now, once you've done a legume rotation, now you've got a nitrified soil, and then the next crop's going to benefit.
Yeah, that. So I feel like it's the smaller farms. I feel like, I don't know, maybe the large factory ones do that, but I kind of feel like they don't.
They probably just take a bunch of chemical fertilizer and just put that on the land instead. I mean, if you're gonna do it without chemicals, then you got to do the rotation of the legumes, which is actually fixing nitrogen from the air, and then putting that into the soil for the next batch of crop, for the next crop. But yeah, I mean, I actually worked on this when I was a scientist. I worked on nitrogen utilization in the soil, so I kind of feel like I know a lot about just the overuse of fertilizer in the soil, which is a problem, because then it leaches off it pollutes the waters.
Right. Yeah. So is there then, so I eat meat, but I try my best to get, pastured, animals that were like born and died on the same farm, like that whole thing. And that kind of, husbandry, I guess, or that kind of animal farming, I mean, that's vastly different than factory farming. And I've heard that, like, do you know anything about like, those kind of like caring for animals that way and actually doing, rotation of them throughout pastures is better for the earth?
I would imagine it has to be. I don't know a lot about the science behind it. I don't, that's because I was a plant biologist rather than a kind of animal biologist, but it makes sense to me. We go with like what I call the hippiest eggs we can possibly buy. The hippier, the better. And that's, that hasn't been something that I've necessarily spearheaded, but my family has been all about, like, they got to be out there roaming free, and they can't be, in these tiny cages or any cage whatsoever. They've just really just, if you could just say, see you later, and maybe we're not going to see them for a few days, that's good for us.
Yeah, they need to be eating like grubs and, bugs, and their yolk should be like orange, not a pasty yellow.
Yeah, so we do those kind of eggs.
Yeah, hippie eggs. Cool. So you had put on a submission form, trees are important to you.
Right.
Talk about that.
Well, I mean, because of my background in plant biology, I definitely had the inkling that plants communicate, and I just didn't know how they communicate to each other, and how plants can even communicate to us.
Mhm.
And then I read this, it's a novel by, so, you know, if it's a novel, is it really scientific? But at any rate, it's based on science, called Overstory. I think it's by Richard Powers, I'm going to say. Anyways, Overstory is the name of the book. It's a novel from a few years ago, and it talks a lot about in the novel about how plants communicate with each other, and using secondary metabolites through the air. So they're emitting volatile compounds that can then travel some number of distances. So some tree that's like, you know, 100 yards or 200 yards away can communicate with another tree. And that's just above ground. Of course, below ground, they're communicating through their roots as well. So
Yeah.
that's kind of why I put that down, just because, I mean, it seems to be an interesting topic in terms of people, you know, people want to know all about the different kind of weird compounds that plants make. And obviously some of those weird compounds can be beneficial to us through, you know, supplements or whatever, but they also just make compounds to communicate, and above and below grounds. And so, you know, that was just my point of, I was just making a plug for the book, really. Not just because I enjoyed the book. It was actually a difficult book to read because of the narrative storyline, the way that the narrative sets up. But I just thought it was a real interesting take. And like I said, I mentioned my hippie eggs, and just kind of sardonically. And, you know, I grew up at a time when the hippies were, you know, were kind of ruling the earth or whatever. And I went punk rock. And so you kind of can't be hippie if you're punk rock.
Right.
And now, and having read this book, I cast a sardonic gaze on it. At the same time, I go, no, this is borne out by the science. So sometimes the hippies have it right, is my point.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's science that backs it, and it's not just like this like floaty feeling.
Yeah. No, you know, and some of the characters in this Overstory book, they seemed hippie, except that then when you actually realize what the science says, it's like they were spot on.
Yeah. That's awesome.
The trees can talk.
It's interesting though, because I know, like, so I'm into like mushrooms like reishi and, you know, lion's mane, and you know, their mycelium is just mind-blowing how far it stretches, and just the web of that. And it's the same kind of like communication network.
Yep. They're talking underground that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, no one quote me on this, but I think that the mushrooms can talk with trees too. Like their roots can communicate with each other.
Yeah.
I'm sure, but.
Yeah. And the thing about all this too, I often have to kind of remind myself, is we tend to anthropomorphize everything. So we talk about trees talking, you kind of go, well, is that just a little too anthropomorphic? Except that there, you know, so maybe the word communication is better. We talk, you know, communication, all it takes is chemicals. Chemicals and receptors are all that's required to communicate. Right. And that's maybe better if it's like that type of, just actually, you know, it's not anthropomorphizing to call it that, as a way of saying that there's chemicals being sent and reception of said chemicals. That's a form of communication.
Right.
You know? Just so people don't think we're nuts here. That's
So what's the word?
Anthropomorphism. Is where that's where you're imparting a humanistic quality to things that are obviously not human.
Yeah.
And especially in the processes that go on in that non-human thing. You know, when we do it all sorts of times, like with our pets and whatnot, you know.
That's what I was thinking, right? Like, oh, they must be feeling like this. Well, I mean, yeah. And the same with the trees. It's not, although I've heard it's I guess it's challenging for a tree if they're just by themselves. Like if someone, you know, like construction, and they cut down a whole bunch of trees and there's like one tree left.
Yep.
That's really hard for that tree to survive.
Isn't that amazing? Because you'd think that, well, now it has no competitors. Now it should flourish because it doesn't have any other trees around it to compete. But in fact, trees are not just competing, they're also communing and with their neighbors and helping each other out. I mean, if that tree that tree in isolation got sick, it's because there was no other trees around to kind of tell it, hey, there's a bad thing coming your way. You better, you better gird yourself. And they've done studies where, disease starts in one tree and other trees nearby can now defend themselves with chemicals again. And it's because the one tree passed along like, hey, I'm getting beat up over here. You better do something. You better get ready. And so
that's so cool.
the tree that lives in isolation like that doesn't have his buddies. So it's, in fact, it is true that they do worse if they don't have trees around them.
Yeah. It's like people, you need community. Community is like the number one most important thing for like mental health.
Yep, exactly.
What keeps you, I guess, on mental health, what keeps you balanced, and like, what do you implement to kind of balance like your stress levels?
Well, for the longest time, it was music. Well, and of course, the exercise as well. I'd say between exercise and music, those two things are really important. But I think it's also important. I mean, and I feel very fortunate in this regard to have your support, your relationships, your support network. And I think about just in this last year with COVID and everything, I don't think anyone was safe from the challenge of mental stability, of staying mentally stable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all kind of, I think, felt like, oh fuck, what now, or just, or the isolation of having to kind of, having to quarantine or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think, your relationships, your support structure, your family, it's got to be right up there with what you do to blow off steam, which for me was music, and what you do to stay healthy, which is exercise. To me, those are the three biggest things that kept me from losing my gourd over the past year.
Yeah. I mean, because it's abrupt change, and it's like a lot of people sank, but a lot of people figure out how to swim with that. So
yeah, and I had periods of both.
mm-hmm.
I definitely, I think in my profession where a large part of it is performing on stage, that was just wiped out, just like, okay, you're not gonna do that for a while. And so, yeah, I think insofar as people get pretty tied up with their means of making a living, and I definitely felt like, oh, now what do I do? And so I think you're right. A lot of people, if they sink, it's maybe partly because they didn't make a pivot. They didn't pivot at that point to something that they could do during this whole period. And I know, for example, doing these podcasts, I've been doing tons of podcasts. I just go, where did all these podcasts come from? And it's like people are like, well, we got to do something to make it through this thing. And that's how people, I think, are, at least one avenue that people are going, for sure.
Yeah. And it loops back to community, because, you're connecting with people and then trying to create more connection through that episode or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all for the greater good. It's good.
Yeah.
What do you miss from live performances? Like applause, or, just having that like outlet, for energy?
I mean, I probably more than anything, I miss being with the other guys in the band, because we just had a good, we were like a little family, and it's like you'd get on stage and you'd come off and it would just be like, this great feeling of just camaraderie with these other four guys. This particular group of four has been together off and on, I should admit, but off and on since 87. So that's like 30,
33 years.
33 years, 34 years, 34 years, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, and my relationship with Bill, the drummer, goes back even to the late 70s, early 80s. And so it's just they're a part of me. And so that's probably the thing I miss the most. But yeah, I would say communing with the audience. We play shows, and a lot of it is like, for us, it's a celebration of all the effort and the time that we put into it, because we can get on stage and just kind of survey the whole thing, go, we built this up, we worked our butts off, and now we can have this big party, and that's what it is, a big party, and everyone's celebrating, and we're celebrating the fact that we can that we can still do it. That's
Yeah.
all the thing, is that, hey, that's part of the celebration, is that we're going to try to stay healthy and still be able to do this into our very old age. Yeah.
Yeah. So it doubles as like a celebration of life as well.
Yeah.
When you have obstacles or rejection or something that's been kind of thrown your way, how do you maneuver around that?
I think what I've tried to do is incorporate other parts of my life to fill in for that. If there's disappointment, then I can go, well, I got other balls in the air, I can let that ball kind of bounce on the ground. You're juggling, and balls, you miss a ball and it bounces on the ground, but then you just focus on the ones you still got in the air. And I've done that my entire life, almost to a fault, because I've juggled a science career and a music career. And sure enough, you're gonna be feeling disappointment and severe setback in both of those areas, which I did. But at that point, I would just be like, okay, I'm going to set that aside and go do this other thing. I mean, we toured like crazy in 95, 96. And I thought, man, this could be, at the time I thought, this is going to be either the thing that makes me commit to music from here until the end of time, or it's going to be the thing that makes me just, run screaming away from it. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. I just, I basically, after a year, I was kind of like, well, that was really hard. I'm going to go do my science now. Mm-hmm. And, but I think that's what I've always done when it seemed like I was putting a lot of effort into something without getting as much back from it that I wanted to.
Yeah.
I would just go do this other thing. And, I think, I'm very grateful that I even have that ability to, or that opportunity, I should say, to just kind of shelve something. I'm going to put this on the shelf and then go do this other thing. Mm-hmm. And it's probably not, not something that everyone can, that is an option that's available to everyone, but at least in smaller versions, if you just have a way of kind of having another thing that you can focus on for a while.
Yeah.
If only to kind of divorce yourself a little bit from the disappointment of what just happened, like you said, the setback. So I don't know. That's my approach, and maybe it's not the best approach, because you could say I'm running away from, a setback like that.
You're taking space and getting clarity, and it can, reigniting the passion.
That's what it did, because I would leave music to go do my science, and I'd get reinvigorated by the science. And then when that started to seem like, oh, this is getting kind of frustrating, then I'd go back to the music and I'd have a fresh perspective on the music. And, it's interesting. That probably explains why this band has, I think, explains at least partly why the band has been able to kind of persist throughout the years, is because we always come back to it with a new set of challenges and a new set of ambition and energy to do something with it. So we never let it get stale, essentially.
Yeah, fresh appreciation just
exactly.
So often makes, just for anything, like putting life back into it.
Yep. And that's always been great when we get back to it after leaving it for, a few years, and we just go, wow, I forgot how much I love this, and you just look at, like, we hadn't played a show in 2011. We got on stage in Austin, Texas at the Fun Fest. We hadn't played a show in 8 years, 8 years maybe. And we got on stage there, and we hit that first chord, and, crowd's going crazy. And I look back at Bill and I just go, what the fuck? And it was just this moment of euphoria where we're just like, why did we ever stop doing this? Because it's so much fun. So.
Yeah. Would you ever get nervous with long breaks between shows?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The thing is when we did that show in 2011, I was definitely shitting bricks. I was like, oh no, it's just, I had no idea whether we could still pull it off personally or as a band. I mean, either thing. I mean, they had more of a probably a fighting chance because they'd been playing as this other band all without me, with a different singer. So they were still like, rockers. But I was coming into it in 2011 from just being a science geek for the last, 8 years. And all of a sudden I'm going to try to get back and sing. But it was just so much fun. I could probably look back in that forums and go, yeah, I kind of sucked, but I had so much fun that it made it worth it. And, I think when we got back in 2011, there were some challenges of just like how to be more good with my vocals, or to have more strength in my vocals. And I think that I took on those challenges as they came, but at least that first thing that we did in 2011 was very mind blowing as far as I remember. So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever use like throat sprays or drink tea or anything to help with your singing, like your voice?
Well, yeah. So the two, I'll get to the additives, but I think the two most important things the vocalist needs to do is drink lots of fluids and get lots of sleep. And that's something that I've learned only within the past, say, 10 years, fluids and sleep. It took me so long to realize that, you can do all this other stuff and you'll do the sprays. And if you just drink lots of fluids and get a lot of sleep, you've basically gotten yourself 80% of the way there. But yeah, early on, I can remember, because I sing really hard. I sing hard and I sing gravelly, and my voice definitely gets beat the hell up. And early on, all I knew about was chloroseptic spray, and then I would do that. And then after a couple of years of doing that, realizing, well, that just numbs you. It just numbs you. It's not really giving you anything. So I moved from that to using slippery elm.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I'd heard somewhere that's soothing on your throat. And I can remember the first time going out on tour, carrying along like a 2-pound bag of just the bark. I mean, this is not like in pill form or not in tea form. It was like the bark. So a bag of bark that I brought with me, and I'd put that in the water and steep it up. And you can imagine, I mean, if you buy slippery elm tea now, it's got all this other stuff in there to make it taste a little better, but just the bark itself, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Just to drink that. But that's what I did. And I think it helped, to kind of drink slippery elm tea.
Yeah.
And
it's a mucinogenic herb, so it's very coating, and it has like an affinity for epithelial tissue, so it's very like protective and like reparative.
Yeah, so I guess there's definitely some science behind it. But then when we were recording in 2016 with Bill, he turned me on to this stuff that we call rhombus, but it's just called rhombus because that makes it sound mysterious. It's this stuff here. I brought it with me. See, it's let's see.
So is it a Chinese medicine thing?
Chinese herb, Ninjom Pei Pa Koa. Ninjom Pei Pa Koa. I'm not pronouncing it right, obviously. Sounds good. There, it's good. It's written better there. Ninjom Pei Pa Koa.
Yeah.
It's got,
not heard of.
And the thing is it's got all kinds of weird, stuff in it. Well, I guess I don't read Chinese, so I don't know what it has. But it's a syrup, and you put a spoon of that syrup into hot water, and you make a tea with it. And it's soothing. It has a certain amount of, I would believe, menthol quality to it, just a little bit of a menthol quality to it. I think Bill was working with a producer who said that singer, they were working with some singer, and they said, well, that singer needs some rhombus. And Bill was like, what are you talking about? It's just rhombus stuff. And the guy pulls out this kind of ceramic, oriental looking dish with a spoon in it and says, this is rhombus. And then he mixes it up. And then he sells it. He would sell this rhombus to the singers because it would work so well. And the singers would be like, yeah, I want some, give me some of that rhombus. So he'd sell it to them for like $50 for $50 for one of these little urns of it. Turns out he was just putting this into a ceramic thing and, you know, making a killing doing it. But
Yeah.
I just ended up buying it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in one time Bill bought me like a case of this stuff. So I have a case of Ninjumpe Paquo that I use. And anytime my voice, if I'm recording, anytime my voice gets kind of ragged, I'll make myself some of that as a tea, and it seems to do a good job.
That's awesome.
I wish I knew scientifically why it works, but there's also the placebo effect, which
that goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything like that you can call out, like specifically healthy, that you've incorporated into your life that's like improved your creativity or your music? Or helped cognition wise with the science side and, that too.
I just think for me, it's always been exercise. Okay. Because I find that half of the lyrics that I write, I wrote the beginning line while I was out on a run or even in the pool, like I'm in the pool. Swimming is the most boring activity in the world. I mean, whoever thought that going back and forth like that was a scintillating fun thing to do. I don't know. And I keep thinking, who's going to invent the headphones that work so you can, I think maybe they haven't now, but listening to music while swimming, maybe that's a good something. Someone needs to invent that type of a headphone. But at any rate, when I'm swimming, when I'm that bored, you're almost forced to think up something creative.
Yeah. And
what I do is I'm thinking of lyrics while I swim or while I run. And to me, that's probably been the way that I think it's what frees my mind at most. And I don't meditate or anything, but I think that type of exercise is probably as close as I'm ever going to get to meditating.
But I mean, there's so many different forms of meditation and exercising, and just because it can take you to another level, it can clear your head, you kind of get in that zone, and that zone is, I mean, it's a form of meditation.
Yep. Yeah. And then there's the endo CBDs they use. So
right.
endo CBDs, and that's the thing is that some artists, well, they'd have to take a drug to get creative, and I feel like if you can just turn your brain off and allow it to kind of get in that meditative state, that's probably the best way to be creative. But do it without drugs if you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Do you have any other just tips or words of wisdoms or anything you would want to pass on to anyone? To live their best life?
I think just to maybe remain open to what caroms you around, remain open to making the best of a rebound off. You're like in a pinball game and you're bumping all around, and you might bounce off a bumper and be like, oh, now what? But I mean, if you make the best of it, and that's what I've tried to do with my band and what I've done with science. And I mean, even what I've done with my relationship with my wife, I just followed her wherever she went, and it's turned out to worked out pretty well for me. Like I went from California to Wisconsin and thrived there, and then went from Wisconsin to Delaware. Keep following her around, and then it always seems to work out. Now maybe that's a very Candide Panglossian kind of perspective, but I feel like there's an element of truth to just trying to kind of rebound well.
Mm-hmm. Being adaptive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite quote?
Okay, so you did prime me for this, so I think I can remember it now. This is an X song off of Adventureland, which I love the whole lyric, but one of my favorite lines in this X song off of Adventureland is bet on odds till I broke even, then I just had to go. And I guess it relates to what we just said about rebounding and putting yourself in the best situation for the path forward. Because I think what they're talking about there is you know, they kind of, with their band, they're one of my favorite bands ever. And they've had their moments in the sun, but they've also kind of been, I'd say, kind of an underground or underdog kind of a band. And so I think this Bet on Odds Till I Broke Even, then I just had to go. Like you know, they checked out for a while, you know, and then they just had to go and do something else, be something else. And that maybe that's why I relate to the lyrics so much.
Yeah, I like it. And it also kind of reminds me of, what is it? Like there's a difference between, I probably shouldn't have even started this sentence because I don't remember it, but like stopping and starting versus entirely giving up.
Right. Yeah. There's learning to be had in that for sure. You stop and you start, but you've learned something. And if you don't give up, maybe you take that learning and start right back up. Exactly. And the other thing about that lyric that I like, bet on odds till I broke even, is the bet on odds is the double entendre there. Is like they bet on being odd. They were always stuck out like a sore thumb. They, you know, where did they fit? I mean, they've always just been one of my favorite bands for the fact that they didn't do what anyone expected them to do. Mm-hmm. So they're on odds, you know, and then they just, you know, and now here they are emerging with what I think is one of the best records ever of last year or the year before, Adventureland, which is just, I recommend you check out Adventureland for sure. If you like X, it's a return to some of their best music. Yeah.
Yeah. I liked the X from Australia a lot. And
well, I've never heard them, but I should check them out.
Yeah,
I have like a garage band kind of thing, or
they were late 70s and just raw, like lo-fi kind of like punk rock and roll stuff. Home is Where the Floor is the name of the 45. It's in my case down there, but yeah, it's just like raw. It's good.
So like Radio Birdman, that kind of thing, or
yeah, maybe. I haven't listened to them in ages, but I feel like they might have been more polished than X from Australia. Yeah. Check them out though.
Check them out.
And I'll check out the new X from California.
Definitely.
Cool. Do you guys have anything coming up anytime soon, or anything you want to share on?
Yeah, so we during the pandemic, we with all the free time, we had some stuff that had been recorded quite a while ago in 2002 to 2004 era that I said, well, this is the time to kind of polish that up. So what this was the original bass player and the original guitar player who started the band in like 78, 79, had written a bunch of songs that when I joined the band in 1980, they were still playing a lot of these songs. But then the band did change when I joined, partly because I had a different kind of a voice for that stuff, but also because that's when we started drinking a bunch of coffee. And so then the band got really quick, and all these other songs were like, well, they're the pre-coffee version of the Descendents. And so, but they recorded them. They went in with Bill in the studio. Bill's the drummer. They went in 2002 and recorded a lot of these. And that's just been sitting, waiting for me to do vocals. And I said, well, I'm in the middle of this pandemic. I got to do this. So yeah, this is a Descendents record consisting of songs that Frank and Tony wrote in 2000 songs that Frank and Tony wrote in 1979, 1978. And we're just now putting those out now, decades later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's to me, it's a good bridge between everything that went before Milo Goes to College in that period, because we put out a single, Ride the Wild, Hectic World. And then we put out this thing called the Fat EP. And right around that time, these songs were just getting kicked out of the set. So I think what this could be considered is it's the Milo Goes to College lineup with songs written by Frank and Tony. And to me, it was so much fun to do. Not only did it keep me busy during the pandemic, but it was just so fantastic, the music. And so that's coming out in June, and it's called Ninth and Walnut. And that refers to the practice space they built in the garage of Frank's brother's house. So just like, you convert a garage into a practice space by putting up a bunch of eggshells and carpeting and this kind of thing. And that became their practice space. And it was on 9th and Walnut in Long Beach, actually. So that's why it's called 9th and Walnut. So Descendents, 9th and Walnut in June is that. And then, then the Descendents are also working on a brand new record of new material. And that won't probably come out till next year.
Yeah. Wow. Now the 9th and Walnut one sounds like a trip, man. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is these are little, it gives you a feel for what the South Bay punk rock scene was back then, because, bands like the Minutemen and Saccharine Trust, the Minutemen, as evidenced by their name, wrote these really short bursts of energy. That's kind of what we did. That's kind of what these songs are all about, these short bursts of energy. You write a song, it's a minute long, and then you're done. You move on to the next song. And that's just how we used to write punk rock back in those days. I still like punk rock to be less than 2 minutes for sure.
Yeah.
But if you can do a punk rock song in under a minute, that's even better.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool, man. Thank you so much for sharing and being here. And I enjoyed talking about your Rhombus stuff and Slippery Elm. Yes.
My one supplement. I guess this is my one supplement. So.
Yeah. And it sounds like it serves you well.
Yeah, definitely.
Sweet. All right. Well, cool. Thank you. All
right. Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye.